Hi, I'm Desmond Brown. There's a new buzz in town. It's To Be Caribbean. It's a new blog about the Caribbean experiences about the Caribbean diaspora. And today, you have the distinct pleasure of speaking with Marissa Williams, founder of To Be Caribbean, about how To Be Caribbean got started.
I've always been in love with Caribbean culture from way back when. And it got amplified when I moved to the US, right? Because you start to miss all the things you used to take for granted while you lived in the islands. So that passion actually fed my interest in a lot of Caribbean activities in the US. I've belonged to many associations, worked behind the scenes on a lot of Caribbean events. And I started to see certain themes that concerned me, because instead of celebrating the great things about our culture, you know, the resourcefulness of the people, the creativity, the carefreeness, I started to realize that the Caribbean didn't have a strong cultural brand. You know, we didn't have a very strong story that made us a player, especially on the business side of the entertainment world. I use the example of artists coming up to do events, right? And promoters paying these extremely different prices depending on who the artist was. And that concerned me a lot, because both of the artists would be on what we consider to be equal caliber, putting as much effort into their performances as the other. But because the promoter was familiar, let's say, more with reggae than soca, there would be that big price difference, right? And that wasn't fair. And there was also the fact that, you know, we weren't coming around on this unified platform, because a promoter could only do that because we allowed them to as Caribbean people, right? And part of the reason why we would allow that is because we weren't unified. We weren't unified because we didn't really have knowledge of each other and didn't understand the importance of a strong cultural brand, you know? So To Be Caribbean was and is my attempt to fill that gap, you know, make sure that throughout the Caribbean diaspora, number one, that we know about each other, because until you have knowledge yourself, you can't educate anybody else about it, right? And the other piece of it is understanding that having a unified platform and a strong brand is the only way that we will get others to respect our contribution to their communities. And having a strong brand means that we have to put out a very balanced story about who we are. It can't just be Carnival, or it can't just be parties. Like, there's too many other elements to Caribbean culture that needs to be included in that story. And To Be Caribbean wants to be one of the platforms that fills that gap and gives a balanced story about who we are and what we represent to the world. There have been numerous difficulties. As with any small business starting off a new platform, you know, getting support is a challenge, and it's just the reality of it, right? Whether it be financial support, whether it be community support, because people don't know who you are, so they have no incentive to support you, right? So building a strong enough brand where people start paying attention to what you do has been a challenge, and having the patience to go through that process. Because I always use the example, like in my corporate job, I work for big brands with $1 million budgets, right? So it's a totally different experience than seeing this starting from scratch with no budget and trying to fulfill the mission of connecting with the community, you know, and making sure that they're aware of what we do and how we contribute and adding value. The other pieces of it, you know, it's just personal stuff, time management. You know, I have a full-time job, I travel for my job, trying to make sure that I put enough time into building this brand as I do into my corporate career, you know, and making sure that we have a strong team, and we continue to build a strong team. And I have to shout out my existing team members, Jason Walker, Brian Houchin, Bronson, Blair, who have continued to be very strong supporters of the brand. And I'm looking forward to really building that into a bigger team so that we have our arms and legs in as much part of the diaspora as possible. Being in this industry, and I cast the broad brush of entertainment industry, means that you really have to be able to step out of yourself you know, aggressively pursue interviews, aggressively get content from different places. And I've always had this phrase where I'm like, you know, I support this industry, but I'm not of the industry, because from my experience, it's not the healthiest industry to thrive in, you know, and to have organic, natural, decent relationships in. So it's always been like a challenge for me to reconcile those two, you know. And one of the things that I've had to step out of myself in is the fact that I'm naturally an introvert, right? And people could interpret that as being standoffish, you know. So they don't naturally gravitate towards me to say, let's have a conversation and see how we could do business, let's say, right? So that's something I've had to work on. The other thing is I just have this bias against any kind of groupie behavior, you know, and it's an industry as to whether you intentionally being a groupie or not, your actions could easily be interpreted as such. And just being able to be okay with that, because that's just part of it, and not let that be a reason why I don't pursue opportunities, you know. And I mean, I've had one or two instances where it's worked out well, you know, and I would say the Majah hype interview was one of them. When I saw him on the beach, it happened very organically, you know. I was like, I'm gonna step out of myself and ask him for an interview. He just happened to be in Atlanta the next week, and it worked out well. We got interviews out of it. The same thing with Taurus Riley, you know. There have been a few opportunities where I've had to step out of myself and just have conversations and ask direct questions, and they've always been successful. So I would say those are ways that I've had to step out of myself and make it work. This platform stretches me in many ways, both personal and professional. One of the major things that I love about it is the fact that I'm learning my culture and learning how much things I did not know about my culture, you know. There's a natural bias, I think, for all Caribbean people to gravitate towards the larger islands or the English-speaking islands, you know. But there are many other islands that are just as influential that are not getting as much shine as they should. You know, for example, you know, the Dutch-speaking islands or French-speaking islands that have very strong influence on what we do, you know. So learning about the different elements of, you know, cultural contributions of those islands, I should say, has been a great learning experience to me. And I would also say learning about the works of our different cultural ambassadors, because there are so many people out there trying to push the Caribbean on their individual platforms, and seeing the great works that they're doing and being able to be part of telling their story to a wider audience has been also a great experience. On a more personal level, it's really stretched my leadership skills, you know, being able to work with different people who bring different skill sets and different personalities to the table, you know, being able to balance all those things and push forward in spite of or in addition to. And yeah, being able to force myself to manage my time, which has never been my forte. So those are some of the great things about this whole experience. We're now in the planning and strategy phase for 2017. One thing that we definitely have a focus on for 2017 is making sure that there's a very balanced representation of all the Caribbean islands. You know, the big, the small, English, French, Spanish, whatever it is, make sure everybody's represented. Make sure that we're telling a balanced story about the Caribbean, because as I mentioned earlier, you know, there's a tendency to gravitate towards the things that are entertaining, like girls whining or whatever it is, but that's not our full story. And there's so many layers and so much richness to our legacy that To Be Caribbean wants to be one of those platforms that tells that story in a relevant and engaging way, so that the younger audience also gets to know the depth of who we are and what we contribute to the overall diaspora. And there'll also be more of a focus on marrying commerce and culture to that whole idea of the cultural brand. You know, like having the skill sets and the creativity is just one element of who we are, but being able to translate that into revenue generation for all the different cultural artisans that are out there. To Be Caribbean wants to be one of those platforms that bridges that gap, you know, whether it be in the form of business knowledge that we share with cultural artisans, or giving them a platform to promote what they're doing and make sure that their brand is on par with any other brand that's out there. To Be Caribbean is going to fill that gap. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the To Be Caribbean story, the history, and our future plans. We really want you to be part of this movement. Make sure to check us out on all social media outlets. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 2, the number 2, the letter B, Caribbean spelled with a K. Also, we're actively recruiting for people who want to contribute to the team. So if you have content, if you have a skill set that you think that we could use on the team, make sure you reach out to us via Gmail, tobecaribbean@gmail.com. We want to hear from you. Keep it plugged.